Hi, I'm Jakira Black. At the moment, I'm doing Masters in Creative Writing, and one of the things we covered last week is something called psychic distance, which I'd never heard of before. Another word, a phrase for it would be narrative distance. Basically, it's about how close the narrator is to the character. So, for instance, with a third person point of view, they could be very, very far away, but with the first person, they'd be a lot closer. So I thought that, this was something that I'd not come across before, and I have been sort of looking into it, exploring it, and I thought I would do a YouTube video about it, because by doing the YouTube video, it helps me to understand it more, because I think my assignment that is due in at the end of the month, what I've wrote so far is written in first person, but I'm thinking about doing it in third person, but having a narrative distance at different stages. So what I thought I would do was I would explore it and talk about it to all of you, and share this this idea that I'd not come across, and maybe you have come across it, but maybe you haven't, and this will be something that could actually really help you. So what I've done is I downloaded a picture from the Cinderella film, the live action one. And I'm going to show you, hopefully it's going to appear up here somewhere, the picture 5 times with writing next to it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from a far narrative distance, a far psychic distance, to a very, very near one. And you'll be able to see the variation of what that is, which will be beneficial when you're writing your own stories, because you can move from one to the other, in a scene, which is going to give you more freedom, because obviously, like, if you write in first person, then you are very much controlled by first person and what your character sees, whereas if you can change the distance between the narrator, so that sometimes it's very, very close and you're actually showing, like the character's thoughts, whereas other times it's like far away, so you're showing what's going on around the character. That's going to be beneficial for writing your story and making it more interesting for your reader. So first of all, and I've got the pictures here as well on my Kindle, because I'm going to put them on later. So this first picture, so obviously they're all the same picture, but if you notice, I've drawn a red square around the photo, and I wrote a little piece about this scene from a narrative distance of as far away as you could get, really, unless they were out of the castle. So, candle flames flickered, reflecting on the golden walls and in the gilded mirrors. The room was filled with the sweet sound of an organ, and men and women danced, an array of colourful material swirling around the dance floor. So obviously, like in the picture, we've got a whole view there. It's not, you can see the character maybe in the middle of this, but she's not identified at that time. You just see the whole view of everyone in the ballroom together, which gives you the chance to actually describe the ballroom from a more detached point of view than if you were writing from Cinderella's point of view, because obviously she would only see certain things, and her mood and everything would be controlled, whereas you could be more selective about, you know, sort of more removed and less involved in the story, that actually gives you the freedom to actually explore the little things like the Golden Wars, or like the servants running around, or maybe a dog barking nearby, or a man standing at the table scoffing food and stuffing it in, you know, into his mouth, or even slipping it in a bag, because yeah, you know, and that just gives you a freedom that, you know, you wouldn't get if you were writing it just in first person and all you could write about was what Cinderella saw and what she experienced and what she was thinking, etc. So next up, if we move a little bit closer to Cinderella, and this picture, obviously the square is smaller, so but it's looking at Cinderella now, but she's not identified. The beautiful blonde girl wore a pale blue satin dress which swirled around her feet as the prince twirled her around in the dance. So obviously that's closer now, because we've identified this girl that is, you know, dancing with the prince, but we don't know what she's called. Obviously we do know what she's called, but in that we don't actually know what she's called. You know, and we know sort of like this is the perspective of all the people in the ballroom, you know, and it's like obviously the perspective of the reader, but the reader is detached from her, you know, and having a more sort of like they're in the ball and they're seeing everything and they're wondering who this girl is, and etc. So yeah, so that's the second. So it's not as far away as the first one, but and obviously it's slightly closer, but it's still not first person or equivalent to first person. So next up, the picture, if you notice, the square is a lot smaller now, and it's just centered mainly around Cinderella and the prince. And this time I've actually named her. So Cinderella smiled up at the prince as he held her by the waist. So it's just a very simple bit there, but obviously I could have, you know, wrote more than that. But you know, I'm identifying who she is. This is Cinderella. She is dancing with the prince. He has his hand on her waist. Everything around is still happening, but we are concentrating on Cinderella and what's happening to Cinderella, but we're still not at a stage where we actually know how she's feeling. We're more of a stage that we know who she is, but we don't, and we know what she's doing, but we don't know any of her thoughts or anything like that. So next up, if you notice, the square is even smaller and it's just centered around Cinderella. She was at the ball, dancing with the prince, and everyone was looking at her, envying her, wishing it was them, but she didn't feel smug. She didn't feel she was better than anyone else. She was just happy to be dancing with him at the ball. So obviously there now we have some of, you know, the things that she's thinking about, you know, her feelings and stuff, but we're still detached from her to some degree, because, you know, it's she, it's not I, you know, so it's not first person, but it's a very close third person view to her. So, and then the last one, and if you notice, this is just centered around her head. So this is her thoughts. I am entranced, amazed by this ball, that the prince is dancing with me, that he doesn't shudder because he has his hand on my waist, the waist of a servant. It makes me happier than I have felt since my parents died. And he's staring at me, into my eyes. I can feel little shivers going up and down my spine, and my hand tingles where he is holding it. I nearly swoon when he smiles. So obviously that's like, that is first person, but if you're writing it in the story from a third person point of view, and you're using all these different narrative distance, then you would, I think you would write it in italics, her thoughts, because it's her thoughts, you know, it's her it's a stream of consciousness of what she's thinking, but it's not first person because obviously the narration is moving backwards and forwards. So yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be really, really beneficial for me, because it's going to allow me to sort of move backwards and forwards, so I can describe a whole scene, whereas at other times I can actually describe what the character is feeling. Now, you don't have to use all these. You could just use 2 or 3. You could use the first one and the third one, or maybe the first one and the third one and the last one, you know, sort of like have an overview sometimes, you know, sometimes you revealing who she is, you know, and then you've got her stream of consciousness, her thoughts in italics, you know, what she's actually feeling at that time. And that sort of gives us more of the reader more of a an overview, sort of more of a feel for the story and what's actually happening. Obviously, I've done it on one set scene, which you wouldn't do. You would actually, you know, maybe you would do a scene where it's sort of an overview sort of thing, and then later on you might do a scene that's her stream of consciousness, that's her thoughts and stuff, and then move backwards and forwards. You know, so for instance with Cinderella, you know, I could have had her coming in and, you know, sort of like what's happening in the ball and stuff, you know, and later on have her dancing with the prince, and sort of like everyone wondering who she is, and or knowing who she is, the narrator revealing who she is, but not actually revealing her thoughts. And then later on I could have had it, you know, when she's talking to the prince and he's sort of more or less declaring his love, which is a little bit creepy, but you know, have her actual thoughts and her response to what he's saying. You know, so I hope that this video has been useful for you. I will put, as well as putting it on the screen, I will put I'll put some sort of, I'm not sure actually how to do it yet, I've not worked this one out, but if need be I will put a link to my Twitter or my Facebook, and which well, not my Facebook, I'll probably put a link to either my Twitter or my Facebook page, or both, just so that you can actually see the picture and look at the pictures and actually look at them, you know, and sort of work out yourself, you know, and obviously do some reading about psychic distance or narrative distance, you know, and work out, you know, how that's going to help you. You know, is this something that is going to be beneficial for you just to try, or something that you might like to try just to explore the idea. You know, I mean, I like I said, my assignment, what I've wrote so far, is written in first person, but I think I'm going to use this narrative distance, the psychic distance, to actually have some scenes where it's more of an overview, whereas other scenes where my character's thoughts are revealed and how she's feeling and everything, you know, which that way, you know, sort of I can sort of like show the whole world but also show her. So yeah, so like I said, I hope that this has been beneficial to you. I do encourage you to look into narrative distance and psychic distance in fiction, and have a go, see what, you know, see if it's something that you actually like, because yeah, I mean, when I read about this, because I'd not heard about it before, and I was like, yeah, I really like the idea of this. So yeah, okay, bye.